Benjamin asked, what are some head coaching hires that you thought were just certain to go well, but they turned out to be underwhelming or maybe a complete disaster? I was sure that Charlie Strong was a great hire at Texas, and it just didn't go well. Current town, Fair Oaks, California. Well, Benjamin, I've got two of them. Neither of them are Charlie Strong, though. I got two of them. And what I've learned, before I give you the names, what I've learned in having the access that we get to have in our business is you get more of the full story behind the scenes of when a hire does or doesn't work out. And I used to think this stuff was so cut and dry. I used to think that it was you bring a guy in and he's given whatever he asks for, and he either sinks or swims based on his merit. In a perfect world, that's what happens. This is not a perfect world. As Red said in Shawshank, prison is no fairy tale world. Well, college football is not either. And the bottom line is, sometimes you're brought in, sometimes you're desperate, so you take any offer you can get. Sometimes you're not desperate, you're in demand, and someone dresses up their offer and their program, and their job to be a little bit rosier than it actually is under the surface, and you don't find out until it's too late. And all of a sudden you get there, and you're getting told no on things that your opponents get told yeses on. But the fans don't know that. Media doesn't know that. They just show up on Saturday, and if you don't beat the other guy, even though he's getting a bunch more things handed to him behind the scenes than you shoulder the blame. And you get paid millions of dollars, so no one feels sorry for you. So that's what I've realized. And therefore, I never just look at guys, or I rarely look at guys and say, failure, because I know the stories, you know? So the first one, Scott Frost. When he was at Central Florida, and he's a Nebraska guy, and Nebraska has an opening, and Scott Frost is doing really good at Central Florida, and they hired him at Nebraska. I don't know anyone. There may have been people out there, but I never talked to anyone whose opinion I respected, who told me, oh, Scott Frost isn't going to make it at Nebraska. No, that's a bad hire. That dude's going to fail. I certainly didn't sound like that. If you did, more power to you. I didn't think so. I thought he was a great hire. I thought it was, here's the word of the year, it was the perfect confluence. He's available. They've got an opening. They're desperate. He wants to go back home. Because remember what the talk was. The talk was, ooh, Nebraska can't get an in-demand coach. But it just so happened that one of the coaches who was most in demand happened to have that Nebraska tie. And Scott Frost goes up there, and his records were 4-8, 5-7, 3-5 in the COVID year, 3-9 the next year, and then started 1-2 last year. He never finished higher than 17th in recruiting. He was 23rd, 17th, 20th, and 41st in his last cycle. It just never happened. He finished 16-31 overall. I didn't see that coming. And here was the worst part. At the end of his tenure, I remember doing a segment. Jesse and Colin, we did a segment when he got fired. And I remember saying the biggest indictment on Scott Frost is 5 years in, or 4 years and change, into his tenure at Nebraska. If you ask me, what is Nebraska football? I wouldn't know how to answer you. They didn't really have an identity. It's just the weirdest thing. And so that didn't work out. The other one that I was ultra excited about at the time was Jeff Collins coming to Georgia Tech. That's another guy that was from Atlanta. He grew up around the program. He had an attachment to the program, kind of like Scott Frost. And this was happening around the same time, by the way. I think Collins may have been hired 1 year after Frost did. So he comes in there, and that program was on life support. When they got rid of Paul Johnson, you know two things. Number one, you need to completely overhaul everything there. You're going to bring a guy in, and he has triple option personnel on his roster, so he's got to be given time. And he went 3-9, 3-7, 3-9, and then they started off 1-3 this past year, and he got fired. And so I thought that it was the perfect match at the perfect time back in 2019. Well, here's what I think happened there. He came in, and then the COVID year was the next year. So the year that they were really going to be able to sink their teeth into fully overhauling their roster, you can't go out on the road all of a sudden. And this is not unique to Jeff Collins. There were some coaches out there. There are guys who don't have jobs today that I think would have had jobs had COVID not happened. And the old retort from the back corner is, Well, everybody had to deal with it. Yeah, but everyone wasn't at the same point in their careers or at the same point in their journey. In other words, Nick Saban had it a little bit easier at Alabama than a Jeff Collins did at Georgia Tech. I guess I am making excuses, but whatever. That's reality. And like I said, he's not the only guy who had to deal with this. But he was at a place where they don't have the kind of recruiting infrastructure like a Georgia or an Ohio State or an Alabama to keep right on ticking. They don't have that, or they didn't have that at that point. So then what I noticed in our model, we have a heat chart. We have a heat map on the depth charts that teams have. And what I realized is post-COVID, I don't think people picked up on this at all. Post-COVID, I looked at Georgia Tech in a lot of their matchups, and their heat map with the experience on their roster versus the experience on a lot of the other rosters that had the super seniors was men versus boys. They were playing like Pitt, I think, one year. And I was looking at Pitt. They got like 23 and 24-year-old dudes everywhere, and Georgia Tech has hardly any. And no one cares about that. They just care whether you win or lose. So Jeff Collins, I think in a lot of cases, there were some things behind the scenes that I don't necessarily think were delivered upon the way that they were pitched in the interview process. But the other thing is, man, that COVID year and then the fallout from the COVID years, it screwed them royally. But again, no one cares. It's just, did you win? No? All right, you're out.